I am more than delighted to be here, and I hope we got a isolated tape of what Tony said so I can take it back to my wife. If I went home and tried to tell her what he said, she'll say, he don't even know you. But believe you me, to be married to a wife for 61 years, and to be the father of 7 boys and 1 girl, it's really amazing travel through life, in that I had brothers that had wives and all girls, 6 girls, 5 girls, and 2 girls, and 1 boy. So my father thought that the wife that I married was the greatest woman in the world. And any time as a young man that she decided to put me out, she would say, don't send your old daddy over here. But my dad preserved our marriage. Not only did he preserve our marriage, but somehow, before his death, I didn't really get the opportunity to tell him really how much being his son that he had instilled in me. And sometimes I ride along, as people ride along praying, I ride along talking to a deceased father and saying thank you. Because there were certain qualities of being the grandson, the great-grandson of Silas Withers, who was lynched in Mississippi when the Battle of Vicksburg was taken, when Ulysses S. Grant carried the American troops across Holly Springs, Mississippi, and then to capture Vicksburg, and coming back home, being a part of a slave family. The slave owners decided to loan my great-great-grandfather to other slave owners, en route to Memphis, Tennessee, some 45 miles, they murdered him, and my family never saw anything but the bits of his clothing to identify the fact that Silas was our great-grandfather. My father, telling that, he told me these things and told my brothers and sisters that, but he always lightened the load of racial hate. He said these were people of yesterday, not people of today. And he did a good job of dissolving some of the miseries of hate, because he told us that hate rests in the bosoms of fools. Fools keep a storage of hate, but decent growers and self-providers have sense enough to know that life requires a little bit more than the anger that you walk up and down the street with each day. And so I hope that I did a good job in instilling my children the same way, that we live within the best of interaction in the American way. I often think of God of our weary years and God of our silent tears. Thou who hast brought us thus far on our way, thou who's bide our bite. Let us into the light, keep us in the path, we pray. So with that kind of thanks, and being a father, having been trained as a photographer in the military in Saipan, in the Marianas, where the atomic bomb was launched to the devastation of Hiroshima, I had the first-hand experience of developing and printing some of those pictures. And it was unbelievable to know that one small bomb would destroy so many people and so much materialness. But somehow I had come home out of the military, 15 days on the ship coming from Saipan to California, I learned that it was very important that you keep your head when all about you. I had a number of police experiences, having been a part of a group of policemen chose after the celebration of Jackie Robinson going to the Major League in a southern city. They decided that they would take a chance and hire 9 young black fellows to be policemen. All of that concrete laid in me gave me the stamina of acceptance to work as a news photographer for some 12 or 14 Negro papers across the country that did not get wire service, but wanted the pictures of the devastation of lynchings. And it grew from the early lynchings of Mississippi to the early integration of Little Rock Central High, early integration of up in Tennessee, at Clinton, Tennessee, and so many things, even until the death of Martin King in Memphis, Tennessee. And to be there to save that film, even in itself, for the world and the public to see, has been beneficial to me. I was not there when Martin King was assassinated on the scene, but Joe Lowe, an African boy, was there. Ambitiously, he wanted to go right away and develop the film. He asked me for use of my lab where he could come and develop the film. I put him in the dark room, and the noise that he was making, which was not required, I knew he didn't know what he was doing. I had him to put the film in a box, went in and developed the 2 rolls of film, which were perfect. And as you see, the people that stand on the balcony pointing where the gunfire came that killed Martin King. Fortunately, I had that mission over and beyond so many years of raising children and taking pictures until it has leveled me to the accomplishment of being your speaker today and your provider of some of the images of my experience. And I shall attempt to analyze, and after the analyzation of the slides that we show, I will be open for questions as long as you don't ask me for the money that's in my pocket or the bills that I owe. We will get along just fine. I am reminded here in 1952, that is the Tennessee license plate on the back of that car. But that bumper sticker says on that it is not as legible from the image, but it says that don't buy gas where you can't use the restroom. Black people travel all over the country, and the first thing they had to ask before they pulled in a filling station was whether they could use the restroom. If they couldn't use the restroom, they'd go up the highway and use it anyway on the side of the road and find another filling station to buy gas. So that was an experience. It was a tremendous experience with Negro baseball because it was 12 to 20 men on a bus and a great big tank. And when they went to the filling stations, they would ask whether they could use the restroom. And there were some cases where men ran toward the restroom trying to, when they got up off the bus, and the man said, up. And the fellow said, well, take that pump out of that gas tank. And to fill up a big bus at a small service station was a big buck that he was missing. So it was part of the change and development of life and time. The sign I referred to is right here. Don't buy gas where you can't use the restroom. Put out by Mississippi Region of Friendship out of Mount Bow, Mississippi. And sometime you may not find Mount Bow on the map, but when you go and relate to Mississippi people, they will tell you both black and white. This is a sign of some angry young white fellas outside of the city hall in Memphis when they decided that they were going to let black people play golf at one of the parks, Overton Park, for an 18-hole golf tournament. And the mayor was in accord with letting the black golfers play golf. And the sign itself from the young fellow let them know that we'll either have segregation or war. But all of these things are yesterday in Memphis, and we live together pretty peaceful. This is the body of an African-American man, a black man, and that particular one was in Mississippi that had been lynched by a mob, and the civic clubs and rights activists would have me come and shoot pictures of them as they lay dead. You can see scars on the body, but that was they in that time of the turbulence of living that somehow today we don't live in as we lived in the past. The scar right here and the scars there and the scars. If we know a year or so ago, I think it was in Texas where a man was drugged to death. But if you experience these things and don't get caught up in the anger yourself, you can keep your head when all about you and witness the things that happen, hoping and thinking that the cause of a Martin Luther King having lived was worthwhile to us all. I was a masculine photographer, a husband of one wife, a lover, not really a love of men. So I had a lot of love for Martin King, but it was the right kind. This was a sign in front of the Memphis Overton Park Zoo. No white people allowed in the zoo today. On Tuesday of each week was the one day that the black constituency of Memphis could visit the Overton Park Zoo. The zoo was in the Overton Park community, which was a very staunch white community, and they put the sign out to kind of eulogize to the white community that was coming that day that they were not allowed. That was one of the few signs across the South where they blocked white people at the right time. This is the man we celebrate today, Martin Luther King. The very first night that I saw him in my lifetime, in Montgomery at an AME church, when the Supreme Court decision was entered and delivered to Montgomery to desegregate the buses. I got a chance to get close and take his picture, and I always considered it a very joyful moment. And then at the end of his life, to develop the tragic images of his death. Having traveled a number of times with him, there are a number of photographers that go around the country that said they were Martin King's official photographer. Well, Martin King didn't have no budget to hire no photographer. I was the official photographer for Negro newspapers, and they paid a very lean bit of pay. I worked 1 week at the Emmett Till trial in 1955 in Sumner, Mississippi, after Emmett Till, a young African-American, was drugged out of his uncle's house, murdered, and tied with a gin fan, a cotton gin fan, thrown in the Tallahatchie River, and only made $35 for 1 week of pictures taken in service. So that was a big pay, but an angry day when the man gave me $35. This is the next morning following the experience with Martin King on the bus. Mr. Wilson was a very tall man and some 18, 20 years older than I, and he woke me up at 4 o'clock in the morning. "Come on, boy." And I'm as scared as I could be, and we drove to the Montgomery bus station and got on the very first bus that came out of the bus station in Montgomery. The bus driver hid his face when I get back over there and take my picture. Got on the bus, took his picture, a lot of pictures of him. We were nobodies, so nobody ever knew that we were the first to ride the bus in Montgomery. But 2 hours later came Ralph Abernathy here, and Dr. Smiley of the National Council of Churches, along with Martin King, for the maiden ride, Montgomery, December the 21st, 1956. There was a man that stood over me while I was making that picture of Martin Luther King, a very tall white man. He said, "Boy, you better be damn glad you didn't take my picture. Do that thing you got would be tore up." And he turned, was smiling, and everybody thought he was saying good things to me. But it wasn't. It was really a salivating moment. This is a young Martin Luther King the same day at the end of the first ride, very proud, when the bus ended up downtown in Montgomery, as he stood proudly, as you can see. In Montgomery, 1956, December the 21st. Here we are at Little Rock, Arkansas, when Governor Faubus of Little Rock sent out the National Guard to block Central High. The big building is Central High School in Little Rock, which was court-ordered for integration. At Clinton, Tennessee, which had occurred a few weeks, a month or so ahead, Governor Frank Clement was a little bit more soluble and more responsive to the black citizenry of Tennessee. He sent the Tennessee National Guard to Clinton, Tennessee, to maintain law and order. But the White Citizen Council of Little Rock and of Arkansas told Governor Faubus, "Don't pull that stuff on us that governor in Tennessee pulled on them. When you bring our National Guard out, they are out to prevent school integration." And that's what they did, and gave growth to Elizabeth Eckford and a number of those kids that were kind of beaten up, and even L. Alex Wilson, the day that they went to integrate Central High at Little Rock. This is the next morning after the Arkansas National Guard had been federalized. The man there is a part of the 92nd Division, and the Little Rock 9 kids were loaded in the station wagon, picked up at the home of Daisy Bates, the black lady that coordinated school integration at Little Rock. The young lady there is Carlotta Walls, Elizabeth Eckford, Minnie Jean Brown, which was most provocative. This is Elizabeth Eckford, the young lady that was really gotten shooken up the day before the Arkansas National Guard was federalized by President Eisenhower, and the U.S. Army were sent in to escort the children. And really was a very freedom time for me because I was really felt safe in a safety zone. While a month or so earlier at Clinton, Tennessee, if the Tennessee National Guard had been another 15 minutes later, my rider and myself might have been victims of death. But they arrived at the right time to save our lives from being beaten to death, possibly by angry mobs. This is yours truly, a young photographer at Little Rock Central High with a camera and a flash gun and a cigar. I was a smoker then. Then this is a real sad moment to me because L. Ellis Wilson, the man that I speak of, that was in Little Rock, that was beaten down by the citizens of Little Rock, Arkansas, that caused Eisenhower to send the federal troops, were beaten and a victim of death a year or two later as a result of his beating, and that's his body when it was delivered back to Memphis on the train, and somehow it was a personal shot, but a news shot. L. Alex Wilson lay in the casket that was shipped in on Track 5 in Memphis, Tennessee. This is Medgar Evers, 1963, as he lay in state in Jackson, Mississippi. The lady is Daisy Bates, the coordinator of the Little Rock Nine from Little Rock, Arkansas. Medgar Evers was murdered in his front yard. For those who had not read the story of the life and time and the tragedy of Medgar Evers, and Daisy Bates was witnessing his body as it lay in state in the Masonic Temple in Jackson, Mississippi, on Lynch Street. It's really a tough name for a street. This is inside at his funeral. His wife here, Merle Evers, his son, his daughter, his brother, who later became a mayor of Fayette, Mississippi. In the funeral inside of the Masonic Temple on Lynch Street, Jackson, Mississippi, in June of 1963. This is the funeral cortege as it came from the Lynch Street to downtown to the Undertaker in Jackson, Mississippi. There's a march of Martin King, the picture that's promoting this event. Martin King and the delegation of foot soldiers marched behind the funeral. This is a picture of Martin King as he was confronted by the Mississippi Highway Patrol downtown in Jackson, Mississippi, following the body. The man here is a Reverend George Lawrence, who was out of New York, the successor to Adam Clayton Powell in his church in New York City, George Young, Martin Luther King. This, of course, is downtown Memphis, where protests were early, and my early experiences were downtown Memphis. The sign solidifies itself. Memphis, Tennessee at Main and Monroe. This is on Main Street as well. The little lady, and the sign reads, "Daddy, I want to be free." The men in the police station wagon, if you see, it's 4 men. They were really armed to do their duties as police and to give us an awful hard look taking the pictures of what was going on. The young lady in the basket today is now a medical doctor in a clinic in Memphis, Tennessee. Her father has passed on, and mother, but it's quite a rememberable picture in the annals of civil rights. This, of course, is the black lawyers at the court in Memphis, Tennessee, at the city court. The gentleman here is Benjamin Hooks, former director of the NAACP. The man here is Jeff Estes, who defended people in Tent City, Fayette County. The gentleman here is Memphis. All of these are Memphis policemen. And, you know, some of us know Tim McCarver. That was his uncle, who was a policeman. The young man here was a city prosecutor who later became the clerk in this man, Odell Horton's office as a federal judge. And when he came to buy this picture, he told me that all of these men, 1, 2, 3, 4, were appointed to be judges, and all he got out of it was a heart attack. This is at the old Memphis airport, Martin King's first visit to Memphis in behalf of a political campaign known as the Sugarman Hooks Bun in Love. Benjamin Hooks ran for the juvenile court judgeship. Russell Sugarman ran for the county commission. The two Bun in Love ran for the school board. At that time, the Memphis city government was a 5-man government, and everybody for every position was elected at large, and there was no possibility of any African American being selected. But once they changed the government from the Martin Luther King visit, they were elected at large in a larger council form of government. They were elected by districts. 3 African Americans were elected, and the mayor, Henry Loeb, was elected as well and became still a troublesome mayor because he refused to collect dues checkoff for the unionization of sanitation workers, which became the problem that trafficked all the way in to the death of Martin King in Memphis, Tennessee, in defense of the sanitation workers. These were citizenries of Memphis. This, of course, is a view of Fayette County in Tennessee, where black people were not allowed to vote, but if they attempted to vote, attempted to be registered to vote, they would be kicked out of their homes as sharecroppers on the farm. So they organized a tent city project where they built a group of, just bought from the Army Depot in Memphis, a group of tents, and fast as the owners of farmers of Fayette County put them off the farm, they, with 4 and 5 children, were sleeping and living in one tent in Tent City, Somerville, Tennessee. The sign is a delegation from Philadelphia, and this man was the news reporter from Philadelphia. Somewhat, I was just mentioning earlier today with Mr. Deaconess that this man, though he was an African American, he didn't have much trust in even me as a Southern African American. That's a family that lived in one of the tents in Tent City. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children, a wife and a husband, and one room tent that they lived in for like 6 to 8 months in Fayette County, Tennessee, because they were desirous of becoming registered to vote. This is a young lady in the same town of Fayette County, Tennessee, Somerville, that had gotten proud and that she had received her voter registration card and a big grin to be a citizen of America. This is a man, Odell Sanders, who was in the next county pleading with other black people in that county to register to vote. Odell Sanders in Brownsville, Tennessee, which was a town that Tina Turner came from. Tina Turner is from Nutbush, Tennessee. And Nutbush is where this man was in the 50s soliciting people to vote. This, of course, is protest march downtown Memphis. The Reverend H. Ralph Jackson here was the man that organized the sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee, that Martin King finally was assassinated in the sanitation workers movement. Ralph Jackson told a group of African Americans that he was on the get out committee and not to go to jail committee, that he wasn't going no jail for nobody. But in marching from City Hall back to Claiborne Temple, the police gave him a good mason and a good whipping and a number of other people, and he went to the next rally and said that he was ready to go and march and be arrested and serve in jail. He later died, but he was head of the movement in Memphis to secure the voter registration and to clear the sanitation workers' war. Memphis COM, Community on the Move for Equality, operated and managed by H. Ralph Jackson, an AME minister, and any of these people who would be AMEs know that he started the minimum salary department of the AME church that subsidized preachers who had to preach, and the church could not pay them the full salary. This is a picture of Medgar Evers live, Dr. Aaron Henry, and a delegation of Mississippians that came to Memphis to witness a speech by Thurgood Marshall, who never went to Mississippi. This is another tent city situation. You can see what a turbulent collection of living with outside smoke and what have you, and the other tents that people lived in Fayette County, Tennessee. This is, of course, a group of invaders at the Club Paradise in Memphis that were part of the groups that some people claim that helped to raise the devil in the last march of Martin, that gave the forces that slipped into Memphis in a few days following this and assassinated Martin Luther King. This is, of course, a Martin Luther King at the Metropolitan Baptist Church, Memphis, Tennessee, a few weeks before his assassination. This is a Martin Luther King and a group of civil rights activists, Stokely Carmichael right here, Floyd McKissick, Hosea Williams, Martin Luther King, Dr. Green, staffers that were strategizing in the Poor People's March, or the March Against Fear, established by James Meredith after wanting to develop and defeat the fear in the hearts and minds of people. This is, of course, a Martin King getting him a Kentucky Fried Chicken with H. Ralph Jackson, head of the sanitation workers. Kentucky Fried Chicken was accessed. This is the poor people's, the March Against Fear on Highway 51 from Memphis to Jackson, Mississippi, with a collection of, they broke to come to the side of the highway, marching from Memphis when James Meredith was shot as soon as he crossed the state line into Mississippi. This is still a part of the poor people's, of the sanitation March Against Fear in Memphis. Floyd McKissick, the preacher of Alabama, Dr. Shuttlesworth, Bernard Lee right here, the assistant to Martin King, Floyd McKissick of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, and Martin Luther King, on the highway in Mississippi during the March Against Fear. Still a March Against Fear was Martin King, Bernard Lee, and Cleveland Sellers, the companion activist with Stokely Carmichael. This is still the March Against Fear. Abernathy, Martin King, and the other man, head of Congress of Racial Equality. Dick Gregory decides to change shoes in James Meredith's hometown in Mississippi, but just novelty picture. This is James Meredith when he came back to the march in Jackson, Mississippi, after being shot, and it was healed in a week or so and got to Jackson, Mississippi. The image here is Dick Gregory, Ralph David Abernathy, James Meredith, who was shot in the head. The real strength of that story was that he, having been shot, a young reporter filed a story that he had been murdered, and the impact shook across the world and caused such a big collection of civil rights activists that came into Mississippi to support the March Against Fear. This Martin King in 307, 1966, 2 years before having been assassinated in front of 306, the next room, or less than 307, in the Lorraine Hotel at Memphis, Tennessee. Martin Luther King in the same room in 306, relaxing, reading the headlines of James Meredith having been shot, as he and the man that shot him was on a $25,000 bond. The Memphis Press Scimitar, which is not a newspaper anymore. This is sanitation worker time. We are together, a downtown slogan, downtown Main Street, during the sanitation strike when the military was in town to maintain law and order. This is Martin Luther King as he left Centenary United Methodist Church the day before his assassination. April the 3rd, 1968, he came into Memphis, went to the Lorraine Hotel, was assigned his room, went back and addressed a group of ministers in the Centenary United Methodist Church. The white fellow there is Baxton Bryant, a white activist. The white fellow here is Malcolm Blackburn, the first and white minister of a black church, Claiborne Temple in Memphis, other ministers and activists at the Centenary United Methodist Church. Fannie Lou Hamer, for those who would know about activists in the South, Fannie Lou Hamer was a very vocal woman in Mississippi, not killed but very active, and kept the noise for a better day, as they do have in Mississippi today. This is garbage on the streets of Memphis, Tennessee, garbage for sale, which was just kind of an agitation, the sanitation strike, justice, and we are together in Memphis during the approach to the death of Martin Luther King. This is, of course, the I'm a Man, which was the biggest and most popular sign. That's the background of the last march of Martin King. Those are sanitation workers, and they had to get a statement for Mayor Loeb in Memphis, Tennessee, to make a very clear statement. I'm a man. Each individual was an advocate of himself. The elderly man, that happened, and a few months ago, his grandson, one Elliot Perry, had been a professional basketball player for the Phoenix Sun, and saw that picture and went wild over it. Martin King, in his last march in Memphis, Tennessee, on the 29th of March, 1968, the Reverend Rowe and the activists surrounding him, the Bishop B. Julian Smith, who died, never forgave me because they named him Ralph Jackson in Life magazine instead of identifying him as who he was. This is the very beginning of the Riders' March that Martin King last March ended in violence. The policeman was knocked down at Main and Beale and started the mace and the turbulence that developed that lasted from the 29th of March till the 5th of April, or the 4th of April, when Martin King was later assassinated. This is the violence and the army troops that came in, and you can see the shrapnel and paper signs and materials up and down Beale Street. That's Beale and Hernando in the heart of Beale Street, the entertainment district of Memphis, that produced Bobby Blue Bland, B.B. King, a number of others, Al Green, and all of them were produced on Beale Street, Memphis. This is if troops guarding Beale Street the evening after the final march of Martin. This is Schwab's, one of the oldest dry goods stores. Its windows were broken out the night of Martin's, the day of Martin's last march, the 29th. Beale Street, the night, and the shrapnel from the last march of Martin before his assassination. A young man that got a good light head whipping on the day of Martin's last march. The press comes to Memphis after the assassination of Martin. The young man on the base is the son of the late Ralph Abernathy. This young man grew to be an elected official in Atlanta, and some of the people know of his turbulence. His career did not last. This is a window where James Earl Ray, or the perpetrator of the assassin of Martin, fired the shot that killed him across the street. Martin was standing in front of 306 where he was shot. From this window, the man, the assassin, stood on the back of the bathtub and fired the shot, the fatal shot that killed Martin Luther King. This is blood left on the balcony from the shot that caused the assassination of Martin. On the balcony, the Lorraine Hotel, around the corner is 306 where the shoes are, and on this side is 307 where we had photographed him in 1966. This is a briefcase of Martin Luther King that has just gone on sale for $2,000 a couple of months ago. In the room 306, as Martin left it with his book, Stride for Love, Strength of Love, in the room at the Lorraine Hotel the night after his assassination. Martin King's body, as it lay the next morning in the funeral home of R.S. Lewis after his assassination on the morning of April 5th, 1968. I had an occasion to display that picture and a number of other pictures in Chicago, and Martin King's wife said, "That's not the official picture of Martin." And they asked me, what did I have to say about it? I said, well, that's his wife. That's Martin King, and he is officially dead. A better statement. Hosea Williams here, Bernard Lee, and Andy Young, the night after the assassination, in room 306 of the Lorraine Hotel. Hosea Williams is passed in Atlanta. Bernard Lee was the secretary to Martin King, and Andy Young later became a congressman out of Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. I know he was an elected official in Atlanta. This is the crowd of delegates that came to Memphis in support of the life of Martin King, where they had a mass march on City Hall, Memphis, Tennessee, April the 8th, 1968. This is the Army Guard in the Memphis City Hall downtown after the assassination of Martin King. This is a march moving from the Claiborne Temple to the downtown Memphis, plaques supporting the life and time of Martin. This is the Lorraine Hotel with the widow of Ralph Abernathy White, the widow of Martin Luther King, as they were waiting the body to be shipped back to Atlanta. This is a protest march in behalf of the life of Martin King. Bishop Jordan of the AME Church, the head of the labor union, the auto workers, T.O. Jones, the formulator and organizer of the sanitation workers, the headquarters, but not the place. Mason Temple was the place of Martin's last speech, but Claiborne Temple was the beginning spot of the last march of Martin. And the gentleman, as I was referring to, was Walter Reuther. This is Martin King's wife at the spot where he made his last speech on the 8th of April, 1968, at Mason Temple. This is Martin King's family, his oldest daughter, Yolanda, and Bernice, his youngest daughter, Marty Jr., the older King boy, and the middle boy, Mrs. King, Ralph Abernathy, and the head of the Montgomery Rosie Park at Mason Temple on the 8th of April, 1968. 1968. Martin King's widow in Mason Temple, 8th of April, and his sister as they witnessed a rally in behalf of his life and time. Cheers of activists as the body rolled through the Lorraine Hotel and on to the cemetery. The marchers on April 8th that marched in behalf of the memory of Martin Luther King, downtown Memphis. The Martin Luther King family, in his film march in Atlanta, the mother of Martin Luther King, who was later killed by a young man in Ebenezer, his church, his father, his oldest son, his widow, and his brother, in the film march of Martin in Atlanta, after the body went back and the film was held in Atlanta. This is a film march as it left Ebenezer Baptist Church to Martin King Family Church on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta. This is the Martin Luther King body at Morehouse College, where the services were held for the late Martin Luther King. This is Gordon Parks, a great photographer for Life magazine, here outside of the, after the body had left to go to the film home to be shipped back to burial in Washington. Later now it's in Atlanta. These are the children that rode the mule train from Marks, Mississippi to Washington, D.C., where they broke down the Resurrection City that had been established in the memory and in behalf that Martin King was possibly killed because of the Poor People's March in Washington, D.C., that broke down 19th June, 1968. So we can close this out. So I consider myself concluded because